All righty, well, we'll get started. Thanks everyone for being here. My name is Alex Langerman. I'm a head and neck surgeon and ethicist at Vanderbilt University, and it's a real honor to kick off this conference. It's a topic whose time has come, and we're grateful for everyone who has chosen to join us today. In addition to this registered meeting, for attendees, we'll also be recording this and later posting it for selected portions of this for others to watch as well. So surgery classically was a public affair, right? Audience members included fellow physicians, but also family members of the patient, the interested public. When they recognized that sterility was probably a good idea in surgery, rather than closing off operating rooms, they just created glassed-in operating theaters, the first one being actually as early as 1880s in Spain, but this continued through. There was always these efforts to find ways to extract the data from the operating room so that people could learn from what was going on. And there was an openness to, as I said earlier, family members. This is a picture from Salt Lake City from the 1930s of the wife of the patient watching over the procedure, a thoracic surgery. The American College of Surgeons would live broadcast procedures from a hospital in the city for which the meeting was being held for all attendees to watch. And there was really an openness to surgery. It had to be on display so we could learn. And then that changed. It stopped. The ORs became closed off. Now, a couple of reasons for this. One, surgery became more commonplace. It was almost, I don't want to equate our specialty to a factory, but it was something where factory physics was actually being thought about in surgery. There was high volume. There wasn't the single exciting display of a procedure, but rather a routine, safe operation. Additionally, there was increasing concerns for malpractice. This is in the US, this is US data, but the environment of malpractice became prohibitive for freely sharing medical data. And the OR became a closed off space. Now that is changing. And some of the forces that are making it change, well, one, probably the largest force is videoscopic surgery. So when laparoscopy was starting to be promulgated in the 70s and late 70s and 1980s. And then advanced video technology was coupled with that. Suddenly there was an easy way to record surgical procedures. Now we used video just to operate, but all it was a matter of was turning on the record button. And the Michigan Bariatric Surgery Collaborative is one of the pioneers of using these videos. Now, as a little bit of a background, they were collecting data all across the state of bariatric surgeons, minimally invasive surgeons, on their outcomes. And then this group published a wonderful study. Birkmeyer was the lead author in the New England Journal, where they had each surgeon as part of this collaborative send in a representative video of them operating. Just send us your best video. The videos were edited down, blinded to who the surgeon was, and a panel reviewed those procedures and assess them on technical skill using the factors that you see to the left. And what they found was a strong correlation between surgical skills and complication rate. The better surgeon you were, just in any video taken of you, the better surgeon you were, the lower the complication rate. And although this is something that we knew in surgery for a long time, we all know of surgeons that we've trained with that are great, surgeons that we trained with that we didn't think we'd ever let operate on us. And the reality is that that connection is a true connection. And this was the first article to prove it. Now, the collaborative has gone on to publish a number of papers associating surgical skills and outcomes. And they're a really important force in showing the value of surgical recording and surgical skill rating. This is a most recent paper, which I point out only because it moved beyond just surgical skills to look at what you were actually doing in surgery. This is a complicated graph, but you can see at the bottom that there's some little bracketed areas, and what they'll show are the different steps of a sleeve gastrectomy. And in each of those brackets, you have different options for how you do it. And, everyone might think that, a surgery is a surgery, but depending on your background and the surgeon's preferences, you may do a completely different operation from one surgeon to another. And so they didn't look just at surgical skills, but also at what the surgeons were doing as far as their choices for how they did particular steps, and associated those with outcomes as well, showing the power of video to detect variations in how we do surgery. It's important to acknowledge some of the pioneers in a whole room recording. So Matt Weinger, who was at San Diego, is now a colleague of mine at Vanderbilt, pioneered anesthesia recording for assessing patient safety and improving anesthesia, and he still does this work. Stephanie Guerlain and colleagues developed the rate system in the sort of a first attempt at combining video feeds from the surgical procedure itself and the whole room. And then there was a complicated system for rating this. I mean, I think when you look at that, you can see that it's old. It's an older study. You can see the Windows OS frames there. Probably the most important technological development and force in surgical recording right now is Theodor Grancharov's group out of the University of Toronto, pioneering whole room recording and the assessment of those recordings in an efficient manner, such that it's realistic to begin assessing high volumes of surgical procedures. And what's important about what they found from this whole room recording, so you see, you don't just have the vitals and the procedure, but actually pictures of the team and audio of the team, which is crucial here. They're able to look at how the team performs and how this helps them actually give good patient care. Things like auditory distractions or what people are talking about in the operating room and how this correlates to patient outcomes. And pulling in all members of the team, not just those who are holding the instruments, but, as earlier mentioned, the anesthesiologist, but also the nurses, because there's a critical part of the surgical team and surgical techs. And so including all of them in the ability to make surgery safer. Carla Pugh, who will be joining us later, runs the TECI. It's the lab at Stanford, and I had the opportunity to participate in one of her studies at the American College of Surgeons in 2019. And her work, it goes beyond surgical video or audio recording to include sensor recording as well. And this is a reality that we may be wearing sensors as surgeons, as surgical team members, as nurses, anesthesiologists, as we go forth into the future of surgical quality improvement. And the world is becoming more connected. Recording video is easy now in any location, and these social media and simplified recording opportunities are entering our operating rooms and creating a treasure trove of surgical data that has all sorts of uses and all sorts of implications. Additionally, we're seeing live surgery broadcast again. And so the barrier of the operating room is being broken down, and we're having opportunities to step into the operating room from outside. Atul Gawande wrote about coaching back in 2011, surgical coaching, having a senior surgeon come in, watch him operate, give some advice. And surgical recording offers the real opportunity to have the post-game footage to talk about what you did in the operating room, what could have gone better, what went well. And this is going to be critical for surgical training. It's see one, do one, then watch it again. That's a really neat step to what we can do and offer our trainees. CSATs has made a business out of surgical skill rating and can actually give surgeons feedback about how they performed in a given case and where they fall on a particular bell curve. Company that I started back in 2015 focused on surgical efficiency. we found a very interesting turn of events with the pandemic. Suddenly, there was a strong desire for telepresence in the operating room. It was sort of a neat thing before then. You had surgeons who might operate across the Atlantic Ocean, doing a gallbladder resection or something. But actually having surgeons remotely present in the room was only an occasional situation. Now we have companies, we have surgical proctors, people desperate for finding ways to have telepresence. And this has to do with the way that COVID has changed our perceptions about virtual presence. I mean, to wit, we're in a virtual meeting right now, which probably never would have been thought of a little over a year ago. The other really important development that has happened within a surgical recording is artificial intelligence. Because if you think about it, you have a surgical recording, you have your audio, your video, and someone has to watch that and hand rate that. And that's just not scalable. It's just not possible to watch every minute of every operating room everywhere. However, as we teach computers to watch, as we teach computers to learn what we're doing, recognize what's happening, assess our skills, and even provide feedback, such as safety areas or where you could potentially have some harm, that is going to be the explosion of surgical recording and the demonstration of its important use as a whole profession, as a whole health system innovation. Now, with these exciting innovations comes some questions. The surgical team, we want them to be happy. We want them to perform well. And we don't necessarily want them to have to play to the camera. We don't want them to feel like they're being watched. We want them to be able to wrestle with the idea of having feedback on their procedures. It's not like it's not a good thing. It's a great thing, but it's going to be a change to the way that we do business in the operating room. And then, of course, our most important customer, our most important stakeholder here is the patient. And the operating room is intimidating to them. It is something where it's unfamiliar. It's this sort of sacred space where they subject themselves to other people's actions willingly. And drawing back the curtain from the operating room may have unanticipated consequences as patients discover the realities and the disconnect between what they think might happen and what actually happens. But there's also a really strong desire by patients to know what happened to them in the operating room. And I think a valid right for them to know what happened. There's a curiosity. There's a nice picture of a patient taking a picture of her own specimen in the recovery room. So before we get started with the rest of the meeting, a couple of quick thank yous. First of all, our sponsors. My home institution, Vanderbilt, has been very generous in sponsoring this meeting. This meeting is home is the Center for Biomedical Ethics and Society. It's offered tremendous support, as has my department, the Department of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery, and Ron Evie, our chair. I want to thank St. Michael's Hospital and the International Center for Surgical Safety, of which I'm an affiliated scientist, and the incredible support that they've given to this, not just this meeting, but this topic globally. Two additional people that must be thanked. Candace Mash, who is running this meeting and has provided the support for this meeting for the entire, from its innovation to its to today. And also Kelly Vidito, who is my research assistant for this meeting and developed the annotated bibliography that is available and linked through the conference website at www.surgicalrecording.org. We have a tremendous set of speakers today. These are experts, world experts in law, in ethics, in surgery, anesthesia, and in nursing. These are people who have developed new innovations in surgical recording. These are people who are pushing the boundaries. These are people who have written seminal papers examining these issues. These are people who have implemented surgical recording in their operating room successfully and unsuccessfully, so we can hear the true tales from the trenches. I want to give a special thanks to the moderators of this meeting. So Andy Schumann is a head and neck surgeon and surgical ethicist, and he directs the clinical ethics service at Michigan Medicine. And then my two colleagues in the Center for Biomedical Ethics and Society, Ellen Clayton is a pediatrician and legal scholar. She was a co-founder of our Center for Biomedical Ethics and Society, and also directs the Center for Excellence for ethical, legal, and social implications of genomic research, which is really where we got the title for this. That's an established way to look at the implications of new medical technology. And we're taking the Human Genome Project's great idea and applying it to this technology. And then Catherine Hammack-Everon, who I work with extensively and is one of my favorite collaborators. She's a law and ethics scholar in our center, and also has expertise in imperial bioethics and law, and runs our medical school course on ethical research. So we're going to start with an open panel. Think about this as a fireside chat. So I have two really important speakers to start us off, and I'm grateful for their participation. So first we have Jerry Freed. He's a professor of surgery, and he's the Associate Dean for Education, Technology, and Innovation at McGill University. And he has been a longtime proponent, including in the American College of Surgeons, of surgical recording, and is an important voice in this discussion. And then Teodor Granchov, who I mentioned earlier, one of the pioneers in this field. He's a minimally invasive surgeon at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto and runs the International Center for Surgical Safety and Surgical Safety Technologies in the OR Black Box. So Jerry, Teodor, thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thanks. And
thanks, Alex.
You bet. Now, Candace, are they spotlighted now? Perfect. All right. Welcome, gentlemen. You are live. So thanks for being here. And, you know, the first question I'm just going to kind of throw out, and I'll start with Jerry, is, you know, what are we trying to even solve with surgical recording? Like, what's the point here? Like, why do this? You know, we talked about some background in this opening, but what are the things we can improve about surgery in today's, you know, we do a pretty good job so far. What can we make better?
Well, first of all, I think you have to accept that what we do in the operating room matters. And traditionally, what happens in the operating room is pretty opaque. So when we look at quality and safety issues, we often focus on things outside the operating room, patient factors, system factors, et cetera. But if you believe that what happens in the operating room matters, then capturing that is absolutely critical. So I got interested in it, particularly in the early days of laparoscopy. It was easy to record things. And as you start to watch recordings of bile duct injuries, then it brought up a whole new opportunity in terms of education and safety.
Teodor, you want to add in anything else?
No, I obviously really fascinating meeting and excited to have a set of conversations throughout the day. But you know, I always have, whenever we discuss pros and cons of video capture or use of modern data science in surgery, I feel a little conflicted. You know, from one side, I love the approach in healthcare where everything is evidence-based. We don't implement solutions before they're thoroughly analyzed, validated through randomized trials. But at the same time, that really slows us down. While we still talk about pros and cons, others have done it. Other high-risk industries like aviation, oil, nuclear, professional sports are already doing this. They've been doing this for years. They made the shift from safe to ultra safe, while we still are stuck in the discussion of whether we should do it or not. So I think today we have the opportunity to, of course, thoroughly evaluate what are the ethical, social, legal implications of video capture and applying data science to the operating room. I think we also need to recognize that this is a tremendous opportunity that is still not mainstream in our practice. And if we reach a point where this is widely implemented and the benefits widely utilized, I think we will see tremendous improvement.
If I may add, also, I think that as a person who's focused a lot of his career on surgical education, education requires an assessment of needs, and it requires a feedback loop. And so, if we want to train people to be surgeons, then we have to understand where they're struggling, and we have to try to measure that. And we come up with educational interventions, including debriefing of surgical videos, and then look at the impact. So if we ignore this, then there's a huge gap in our ability to train surgeons properly.
Yeah, it's the education, it's the safety. They're so critical, and the barrier has been these silos. You know, you're hidden in your operating room. You're a single sort of a closed off space. And, you know, I'll add that, you know, I think in addition to the more important points that both of you brought up, there's also the surgical efficiency and cost improvement and all the things that our health systems need to think about as we move forward, and surgery and technology is becoming increasingly expensive. You know, there's another opportunity to say, well, what are the opportunities for improving patient safety? What are the opportunities for teaching better? What are the opportunities for making surgery more efficient and more cost effective that we could promulgate through our fields? And this is the opportunity to do so. Now, Teodor, I'll start with you on this. Has this changed anything yet? So there's a lot of potential with this technology, and we're talking. This is the first conference, right? We're talking about this exciting technology that's been growing over the last decade or so. But has it changed anything? Has it made any impact yet?
I mean, those of us who have been using it can probably recognize so many things that it changed in their practice. I mean, I still clearly remember the first procedure I video captured, and that was in 1997 when I started my surgical residency. I was PGY1 and did my first laparoscopic cholecystectomy. It was on a VHS tape. After the procedure, my perception of my own performance was that nobody could do this procedure better than me anywhere in the world, till I saw my video. When I played the VHS tape and saw that my performance was embarrassing. It was so slow. There were so many unnecessary movements, so many steps that I went through in this procedure that I shouldn't have. So it changed the way I think about my performance, the way I critically reflect on my own performance. And I ultimately believe, I fully believe that it made me a better surgeon. And now we see the analysis is way more complex. It's the way we study the operating room holistically. As you said, we evaluate efficiency, we evaluate compliance to standard operating procedures, we evaluate the safety and of our performance and the quality of our performance. So we can we've started. The question is, how do we turn that into solutions? The fact that we capture it, the fact that we measure it, doesn't mean that we improve it. So this comes a whole new discussion, a whole new topic is how do we take these learnings and implement them in practice? How do we move the research? As you said, there are thousands of publications, there are randomized trials, solid, well-executed studies that demonstrate the impact of a proper assessment, proper feedback, coaching, and still very disappointing knowledge translation. So I think while we have a lot of things to celebrate, we've made some significant improvements on individual or isolated centers using this. We haven't seen this dramatic impact on our industry, on healthcare and surgery that we've seen in aviation, oil, nuclear, military, professional sports, and so on. So I think there are a lot of studies, there are lots of clinical evidence that we improve things. By using video, by analyzing the operating room environment, we improve performance, we reduce risk. Still, we haven't seen the massive widespread implementation that will show us this transition from safe to ultra safe that we're looking for.
Jerry is an expert in surgical education. Well, one, have you watched your own videos yourself?
Very, very, very often. In fact, I routinely video my my procedures. But I think what Taylor said is really important. If we're going to improve, then we have to look at what are the strategies to get there. And certainly, you have to look, you have to measure, you have to teach, you have to coach, and you have to remeasure. And I think if you look historically, there have been a few kind of seminal advances that we've made in education as a result of videos. And you gave an example of the work from the Michigan Collaborative, which I think has really got people's attention. What got my attention was a lot earlier, actually in the mid 90s, perhaps. Larry Way and Lydia Stewart from UCSF collected a series of videos of bile duct injuries. And you would watch these videos and watch competent practicing surgeons cut the bile duct. And it was obvious to me and obvious to anybody looking at the video that they were going to cut the bile duct. And I started to ask myself, why are these people making this egregious, horrendous error? And you started to understand things like attentive capacity heuristics. And this, to me, led a career of educational initiatives to try to decrease the burden of too much attentive demand by trying to get people to focus on some of the fundamental skills, internalize, automatize those, so that they could actually pay attention to what they see in the operating room. And I think these type of steps forward, understanding, like from the Michigan initiative, what goes on in the operating room, and the fact that it really matters, and start to come up with a strategy from an educational perspective to improve the quality and safety of surgery and the efficiency, as you said, and the value of what we do. If we don't look at what we do, we're never going to get there. So we have to overcome those burdens. And I really think that this symposium is a key step in getting there. And we have to, and really have to take ownership of this, because we are a profession. We are empowered by the public to control ourselves. And this is one of the steps that we have to take.
I love that. Yeah, I often reflect upon the idea of the surgeon as the captain of the ship of the operating room, is a sort of classic idea. And yet to do our job well, we're often so coned in to a specific task that we're doing and lose perception of the whole room. And so, to the extent that technology can enable, that perception, but also maybe just give us the space to focus on the task. That's what we're there to do, and I think that's important too. And so I think there's opportunities on both fronts. I appreciate what you're saying. Well, okay, we've heard it from both of you that, this is really important. It matters what we do. What are the barriers? What's holding us back? Why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we doing it right now? Jerry.
Yeah,
go ahead, Taylor.
I was going to say that there are a number of barriers obviously, the video capture is not the solution. The fact that we video record it doesn't mean that we improve anything. We need to video capture it. We need to analyze it in a meaningful way. We need to be able to analyze it at scale. We need to be able to do it cheap, because surgical education or education is a non-for-profit industry, and it's hard to implement high-cost solutions without clear return on investment. And then we need to take the analytics and create solutions. So I think there were lots of barriers. There were technological barriers that we are trying to solve. We haven't solved them completely, but we're making great progress. There are some barriers around analysis, meaningful analysis. There are some barriers around how do we design educational solutions or quality improvement solutions. How do we measure those? And again, so there are lots of costs associated with that. There is a lot of research and other questions that need to be answered before we're ready for mass implementation. And I think we're getting close. I think I've worked in that area for close to or more than 20 years now. I dedicated my academic career to that. I feel that we've made some progress. I think it's time to do it. It's time to focus, to stop focusing on the barriers, to stop focusing on the reasons why we shouldn't be doing it, and focus on the opportunities. So the opportunity to improve, the opportunity to improve performance, to improve the opportunities to make surgery safer, the opportunities to cut waste and make the operating room more efficient. So I think, and I hope that this conference will do that. I hope that we will focus on the opportunity, what this will empower us to do, and how it will help us be better, and not focus on the barriers of why we shouldn't be doing it. What are the legal barriers? Why is malpractice litigation tying our hands? I think once we show the benefits, of course, we need to focus on the barriers. We need to address those because it is a real concern for many of our colleagues and particularly hospital administrators. But I think we need to change this mindset. We've talked enough about the barriers. Let's talk about the opportunities.
Yeah, but breaking through the barriers, right?
Yes.
Now, Jerry, you have been part of conversations at the highest level of our surgical profession as chairman of the board of regents of the American College of Surgeons, and I think you have a very important sort of high level insight into what some of these barriers might be, and also, and I'll sort of pair on this question, is the role that professional societies might play in breaking down those barriers, or in helping to move this idea forward. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that we have to understand the barriers, because we do have to address them. Every time you propose that routine surgical video be done, people push back, and they push back because there's this concern that there's Big Brother looking over their shoulders, and people don't like that. There's worries about the medical legal implications. There's worries about the security of the videos. So I think we do have to address that. The technological solutions, I think, are out there. So I really believe that we have ways of securely capturing, easily capturing, curating the video so it's easy to search for the videos. There's annotation technologies out there, and there's analytic technologies out there. So they will be driven forward much more quickly once we address the cultural, legal, and security barriers. Now, I think the professional organizations are concerned about the same issues. What we have to do is to first of all, get the organizations to accept that this is valuable, and be able to come up with a public statement that will deal with the pushback that a lot of the members are going to make because of their concerns about the legal and cultural Big Brother issues. The other thing is that there's been this firewall that's developed between industry and academia or professional societies, and we have to break that down when it comes to this, because we need the professional societies or the academic institutes to direct the industry. Industry has got the technological solutions, the engineering, the software expertise. We have the clinical know-how. And so what we have to do is build these types of partnerships, do them ethically, but make sure that we don't use this firewall as an impediment to progress. And then we have to establish paradigms that do some research that generates the data, the evidence that shows the return on this investment, the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, so that we can then take that as a way of propelling this even further.
The fine line that one walks, and I think all of us have had experience in this, working both as academic physicians and with industry. Jerry, you've worked with Theodore and other companies, I'm sure, as well. Obviously, Theodore, you have the surgical safety technologies and my Explore company, and all of us have had to find ways to walk that line. And there are a lot of barriers between academics and industry, which in many cases are not. I mean, everyone's looking for the same outcome. I'm not being Pollyannish here. I recognize that there are some very real differences in motivation and goals at times, but that there is so much that we can learn from each other, combining those two. So one thing I want to just bring up that is kind of come with the chat, and I want to make sure gets addressed here, although it will also come up, of course, in our I think at least in our ethics panel, if not in our legal panel as well, is the idea of patient consent and patient willingness to be recorded. We talked a lot about the professional barriers, and we talked a lot about the professional opportunities, most importantly, the opportunities, as you said, Tedor. So from a patient care perspective, from the patients, what are opportunities there? What are our barriers? What do we think along those lines? And Tedor, you want to take it off?
Yeah, I think there is no doubt that patient consent is critical. Patient buy-in is critical. They're the reason why we do this. That we want to ensure that we learn from every single encounter, that we provide the best possible care to them, but also to the patient who will be in the operating room tomorrow. We also need to make it clear, in order to strengthen this relationship between the surgeon and the patient, that we embrace transparency, we embrace openness, we embrace accountability, and we're ready to be honest with them. I think it's so liberating to start to create a relationship around transparency and accountability, and I think the vast majority of the patients will appreciate that. I remember when we first launched the OR Black Box initiative, and it got some public attention. A lot of patients were emailing me and saying, "Hey, I want to move my care to you from a different place because these are the principles I want to see in my healthcare provider. I want to see an individual who is open, transparent, accountable, and ready to admit and learn from their mistakes." So we've seen so much support from patients. We've been one of the most bringing, from a philanthropic point of view, research groups in our hospital. So it just shows that if we do it the right way, if we communicate it properly with the patient, we will get their support. But that support is important, and we need to clearly and transparently not only tell them why we do it, but also we need to address the issues of whose data it is, who owns the data. Is it the patient? Is it the hospital? Is it the surgeon? What happens with the data? Who uses it? Why is it used? We need to address all this. We need to be ready to speak about that with our patients, that we don't capture this data to offer it to a for-profit company whose main objective is to sell more devices. We do it because we want to make these devices safer. We want to do it because we want to be ourselves, improve ourselves. But the conversation with the patient, a transparent and honest conversation with the most important stakeholder in the operating room, the patient, is critical, and their consent and buy-in is absolutely critical.
Jerry, you agree, or other thoughts along those lines?
So we routinely record all our laparoscopic procedures, and it's part of our informed consent process. From the patient's perspective, their main concern is confidentiality. It's not hard to convince them that this is a strategy to improve their safety. They wouldn't want to fly on a plane that didn't have a flight data recorder. The only other question that comes up is, can they have access to the video that you capture? And I think that might be something that's worth discussing. I think Tedor asked, did they own that? Did they have access to it? So I think you have to convince them, certainly, that their privacy is going to be maintained and that it will truly be, wherever it's uploaded to the cloud, how it's used for analysis and teaching purposes, they will be totally de-identified. And if you have the technology that will ensure that as well, I think that's very helpful. But I don't think it's hard to convince them that this is in their best interests and it improves the safety of the procedure. And it is, like Theodore said, it's part of the transparency and oversight that any high risk industry wants to do.
Maybe if I can add a little bit, just for a second, I completely agree with everything Jerry said, and maybe I can share a quick personal story. When we started working with Air Canada in the early days of the launch of the OR Black Box, I learned a lot about the processes of flight data analysis and corporate safety with that airline, and then I learned that in addition to the orange black box that every aircraft they have a secondary black box that captures data from every flight, regardless of whether it took off or landed safely. They're usually things that they can learn and improve and make this shift from reactive to proactive. I understood also that not every airline has the financial capacity to support such an expensive program. And now after I learned that, I fly only Air Canada. I don't fly small or other larger airlines that support flight data analysis and proactive data capture and development of risk mitigation strategies. Smaller, lower cost airlines often don't have that, and so. I can imagine that it will be the same feeling for our patients. They will go one day, if they have the choice, they will choose healthcare institutions that learn from mistakes, that don't wait for somebody to end up on the morbidity and mortality lists, but they understand patterns, they proactively collect data, and they develop proactively risk mitigation strategies. So I often say that I want my patients to feel in my operating room the same way I feel when I board a modern aircraft. And I think this is an example that shows that we as customers of an airline and patients as our patients will value transparency and accountability.
Wow, what a great way to wrap up this first session. And thank you both for your thoughts and your candor and your encouragement of this effort.